Namaste. Welcome to our next talk on the Bhagavad Gita. We're still in the third chapter, and Krishna has been telling Arjuna how the number one thing is to basically get control of his entire complex, physical and mental. Spiritual will take care of itself, but those things are needed. And he's just spoken about the problem mostly is desire and anger and frustration and not having our desires fulfilled. In fact, let me read that passage. The Rajoguna has two faces, anger and desire. The ravenous, the deadly, recognize these. They are your enemies. You see, lower emotions and lower desires in the mind, even if it's way up here. Smoke hides fire, dust hides a mirror, the womb hides the embryo. By desire, the self is hidden because it is, in a sense, denial of the self because the self needs nothing. Now, you could get extreme about it and say, well, then if I'm going to live the life of the self, I really shouldn't eat because the self can't die and the self doesn't get affected by food. So I guess that's the way to do it. No, but colossal fools throughout the ages have thought the same thing, such as the Cathars of France, who thought that to prove that you were truly spiritual, you should starve yourself to death. They would actually go just lie in a bed and then not eat. People, maybe some come and say, well, I want to say goodbye to you. And then they would die. In other words, they committed suicide. So you see, beware of the ignorant mind. It can take us a very exotic levels. It makes an incident about my father's mother pop to mind that is amusing, but it also illustrates how when you don't understand the nature of something, and especially your nature, you can do utterly foolish things and think that you're somehow benefiting it or going in accordance with it. All right, fine. In the so called good old days that weren't good at all, uh, automobiles were not common, and you couldn't go to a car dealer and buy an automobile. You ordered one through a catalog. My grandfather Burke ordered a Lincoln, even at that time, in the top of the automobile types. Uh, he never took a driver's test. He bought a driver's license at the drugstore. But with the car, when it came, there was a book. The book said, this is how you drive the car. Well, he had pretty minimal ideas about it, but naturally, the family, and there was a big family, jammed into the car and went for a ride. At one point, my grandfather said to my grandmother, well, you've got to learn how to drive this too. What if I got sick and you needed to be able to go for help and so on? So uh, I'll trade places with you and you drive. So my grandmother got in the driver's seat and, of course, gripped the wheel. And they were driving on. It was a little shaky. And my grandfather looked and my grandmother was going like that with the wheel. And he said, what are you doing? She said, I'm giving it more gas. which was, of course, not the way to do it. A lot of people live their life that way. They don't really have a clear sight of neither their outer mechanism of the physical body or the inner mechanism of the mind. So the Gita talks a lot about sort of how we're put together so that we can understand it and control it better. So, therefore, we can begin. Therefore, well, it's the first word. Therefore, Arjuna, you must control your senses. Well, anybody can say that. Hey, straighten up. Buck up. Uh, don't indulge yourself. Da, da, da. Well, that's just bullying. That isn't helping at all. But he's going to, but Arjuna, see, is also a yogi. In fact, he never slept. He didn't need to sleep. So he says then, the first step, control your senses. Well, he did that already to a good degree, but he's saying be sure you fully do. So the same was that with us, but how will we do it? Well, the senses are really psychic in their basic nature. They're energy constructs or energy instruments of the mind. Therefore, we must be able to get into that level and so attune and order the mind that we won't have any problem. And that's meditation. And there isn't anything else. You can do all the positive thinking you want, all the creative visualization you want, all the supposed mind control, mind developing exercises you like. You won't manage it, except maybe a little bit. But through yoga sadhana, you get right a hold of it. So then he says, you must first control your senses, then kill this evil thing. In other words, you destroy the capacity for it, or really the inclination for it. And that's by being fulfilled in your own inner self. And that's what sadhana does, because sadhana puts you in touch with your true self. And everything that we are searching for, that we think is outside, is really inside. So if we start to live inside and develop awareness of the inside, then we have satisfaction. Then we have contentment, not otherwise. So we must then kill that desire, which is eliminated by the process of sadhana, which obstructs discriminative knowledge. In other words, we can know things, but don't have enough insight to know, well, this is a more important thing than the other, or, well, this is really what causes something. Kind of understanding the nuts and bolts of our own mind and the own inner mechanism that is really what's behind the life of our body. So this obstructs this desire, a feeling of lack, that we lack something, you see. It obstructs the knowledge and the realization of the self, even hardly awareness that we have a self. The senses, now we get an interesting hierarchical picture. This impressed me very much the first time I read the Gita. I thought, well, this talks about, again, how we're put together. Or this level is higher and this is subordinate, and something is subordinate to that. And it's a hierarchy. And when you understand this, you know how to deal with it. The senses are said to be higher than sense objects. Object could be, all right, this thing which I look at, but also it is the experience of seeing this thing. The mind, manasa, the sensory mind, the percepting mind of the outside world, is higher than the senses. The intelligent will is higher than the mind. That's logical. For example, we see something and it's repulsive. We say, well, I won't look at that. We turn away. So the will has controlled, has altered our sensory experience and even thoughts. You can start to worry and then you say, this isn't getting me anywhere. To your mind, you say, stop it. And then it stops. Hopefully, if not, a little more practice is needed. You must know him who is above the intelligent will. In other words, the real person, the real you, because your mind isn't your real you. Your senses, your feelings, your ideas, your attitudes, they're not the real you. They are accumulations of the real you, the real me. So you must know him who is above the intelligent will. Get control of the mind through, this is very interesting, spiritual discrimination, vivek. I've mentioned the word before. In other words, you've got to use your head. You've got to say, okay, the lower part of me is feeling panicky. Or the lower part of me is feeling depressed. Oh, what will I do? I didn't get what I want. And we have to have in our higher intelligence, we do have to talk to ourselves like we're a child and say, stop it and stop it now and get hold of it and quit it. And it really usually works because we aren't those things. We're being kicked along by them and we're saying, well, that's how I am. But it isn't how we are. We've gotten out of control. When a horse gets out of control, the rider doesn't just say, well, that's nature. No, he tries to rein in. And we have to do the same. In fact, in the scriptures of India, the senses are often likened to horses that then run this direction, that direction, takes you where you don't even want to go. All right. Then, and that's not enough. That's good and it's essential. But then he says, then destroy, like dissolve. Don't think of destroy like, I rip it and I hate it up and so. No. In other words, banish it. Destroy your elusive enemy who wears the form of desire. Because you see, the real enemy is the ego. You see? That's the real enemy. And that's where all the trouble comes from. So we've got to put our finger on that. So it's the summation of the Gita that comes in the 18th chapter. Therefore, be a yogi. There we have it. And actually, when you think about it, we're 6 minutes away from the usual allotted time, but the very next chapter is going to come and give a whole new subject to us. So let me just keep an eye on this and let me talk at random a bit. I think you figured out I can do that. I'm going to talk to you about what a yogi needs. I've been wanting to do this as just a little short thing to have posted, but let me talk about this. You know what you need most of all is a sense of humor. A yogi really needs that. There are these people that say, really serious about my search for truth. I remember during my first trip to India, I encountered people from the West, and that's what they were, sincere secret. Well, I realized I really need to do this or that. I think I'd like to study Sanskrit. I've got to really get hold of all this. Well, yes, you do, but like, aren't that? So I went to see a yogi. I was taken to see a yogi. I didn't want to go to see him. He became one of the gurus of the wealthy in later years. And so I didn't have much to do with Westerners because Westerners who came to India often didn't have money. So anyway, I happened to be victimized and taken to meet him on an island in the Ganges uh, with a woman from Venezuela, quite intelligent person. She had some experience of yoga back in Venezuela, not taught by a particularly capable person. But anyway, so we went. And he spoke excellent English. He had a university education and so on. So her name was Shanti Devi, the Venezuelan lady. And so Shanti Devi sat and she literally go and say, well, if the Atman is such and such and such. So he would answer. He answered intelligently. I mean, he was quite intelligent. But it was all like this. It wasn't like, well, tell me, Yogi Ji, uh, thus and thus and thus. No, it was like, where's this? And as he talked to her, she was like, I'm really, she looked like she was trying to have a bowel movement, frankly. Like, I really be sure I get this and I file this away in my mind. So he said to me, do you have any questions? Is there anything, any way I could be of help to you? And I said, well, you know better than I do. And I meant it in the sense, well, you've got insight, you have knowledge, uh, you can gauge me and know what I need to know. And if I'm a hopeless case, beyond your ability. But he didn't take it that way. He got very insulted. Perhaps because he had a realistic insight of himself that he didn't want to admit. Because when I said, well, you know better than I do, he really knew he didn't know any better than I do. But anyway, uh, that was the end of that. He wouldn't talk to me anymore. And he said, I believe I heard about you. The chief of police of Delhi told me that there was a sincere seeker after truth who was coming up here to Haridwar. And she said, no, I don't know any police chief. I said, oh, you mean Jagannath Sharma. I spoke with him just last week. And I told him I was coming. Well, he didn't want to accept that at all because I wasn't a sincere seeker after truth. Obviously, I was flippant and arrogant. So he just refused to give it. So to acknowledge it. So I from then on I used to say to people in all sincerity, the one thing I hope to God I'm never known as is a sincere seeker after truth. Because you've got to know your strengths and you've got to know your weaknesses, and also you've got to know what you can do and what you can't do and what you have and what you don't have. And we're pretty silly creatures, human beings. We cause a lot of suffering for others and ourselves. We do terrible things. We have wars, we have atomic bombs. But at the same time, we're really pretty darn silly and can be very foolish. And you have to be able to laugh at yourself. When you catch yourself, that's the important thing. The ability to catch yourself being absurd, being childish. And instead of saying, oh, how could I? How could I have misperceived? You see? That's just pure ego. Oh no, I shouldn't have any faults, or I at least don't want to see any faults. So learn to laugh. I had heard this from a Protestant minister actually when I was, I think, 9 or 10 years old. He said, it's very important that you can go look in a mirror and have a good laugh. And he was absolutely right, even if he wasn't a yogi, because that's true. So I want to encourage you to realize, yes, it's serious. Yes, it's crucial. But don't take yourself so seriously. Now, if you do wrong, take that seriously. Oh, yes. If you're lazy, take that seriously. But again, don't beat yourself. Just say, well, it's just normal human nature. We're seeking the divine, but you have to start. The first step of the journey begins where you are. So just learn to even laugh at yourself and say, oh, come on, snap out of it. Quit acting like this. And then move on. And when you fail, well, you fail. The truth is, you're not really disappointed. Your ego's disappointed. Oh, how could I? How could you? Because every human being before you has done it. And chances are you're going to keep at it. And you're going to make ridiculous choices and so on. But just be able, first, to be relaxed, but be able to just realize this is a pretty strange, funny mask I'm wearing. And I'm going to have to learn how to work with it, sometimes work around it. And the angels in heaven aren't horrified that I'm not perfect. And why should I be? I'm serious. Learn to be able to see it, see the humor in it, and then keep on with sadhana, and then it will all come about. I remember a very foolish person saying to me one time, I just can't can't manage to feel good about myself. I was the wrong person to say that to. I said, well, why should you feel good about yourself? You are imprisoned in this world. You're bound about by the chains of your karma. You have all kinds of weaknesses and all kinds of foibles and all kinds of faults. It's nothing to feel good about. But on the other hand, it's equally foolish to feel bad about it. What you need to do is say, I'm going to change, and then follow through and change. That's what being a yogi is. It sounds good if I say it's transformation. That sort of sounds like the transfiguration of Jesus, you see. Once I was wood, but now I am gold. But it isn't that romantic and it isn't that much. It's good, hard work. I one time met a woman who had been at it long enough to have know her way around, and she said, plod rhymes with God. And there you are. So then, understand you have divinity within and bring it out. Until then, laugh at this silly little clown that is only a mask then of our real self.